just because I like to throw a little extra content in here for the YouTube watchers. And then we can always talk about this later. I record separately on my actual Zoom recorder, not the same company.
Right.
That way my podcast track is clean. Zoom still saves you an audio track too. I just don't like to do any editing. So
yeah, that's something I've considered. That sounds like too many things can happen with the feed. Yeah. Go ahead.
Exactly. So, all right, well, stand by and you'll know when to say hello once I say welcome to the show.
Sure. Great.
All right. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Live the Fuel show. So today we're bringing on yet another co-host. This gentleman comes from the New England area of the U.S., and I'll let him expand more about his wonderful abode up northeast. I'm in Pennsylvania, so luckily we're in the same time zone. Our other co-hosts have been all over the place. So this gentleman I already actually chatted virtually prior to setting up this encounter, which we'll talk more about because it's been a roller coaster ride trying to get he and I reconnected again. But he's responsible for the brand TUI. It's a relationship company. We're going to be able to expand more on that as well because there's actually a meaning behind that. But he's also got some exciting new things in the works too because he's, I believe, either relaunching or rebranding into a new podcast. I'm going to let him expand on that too, but it's called Pioneers of Insight. And I love that branding as well. So again, guys, we're going to talk more about this. It'll be all linked in the show notes. We always have everybody's profiles for you to follow him later in case you don't have time to write this down today. But this gentleman is an innovator and an empowerment facilitator and a relationship strategist. So we're going to have some fun today with Jerry Gara. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It always sounds better when somebody else is, giving your creds. We did a very, very detailed conversation last time. So I was like, I better remember some of the stuff. And admittedly, I literally write notes down and then I just read them off the screen because I want to make sure I give everybody a due justice and a proper introduction. It sounded great. Well, I realized that, when I'm listening to it fed back to me through somebody else, that I need to tighten that up a little bit. There's so many things, in terms of descriptors for what I do.
Well, and to be fair, some of your history for our listeners here is you come from a highly, I guess can I generalize it as psychological background? Would you agree with that?
That's true. I come from. Yes, okay. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Okay. So,
and
that's been your career, right?
Coaching. Yes, that's been my career, but I've done a few other things. We can get into that as well.
Well, so let's do this. Where we're at today is obviously TUI and the Pioneers of Insight podcast. Now, am I correct in saying that that's a relaunch? Because I did get some of your emails, and I'm like, okay, I think he's shutting down another podcast, launching another podcast, or what's that transition happening here?
Yeah, it is not a relaunch. My first podcast was called QH Cubed. I was interviewing basically people that were in the healing profession, both on the medical side and the psychiatry side. People that I felt like were pushing the edge, but it was purely an explorational piece for me. I was using that as kind of a test platform for this podcast that I'm launching now. I knew eventually I was going to be launching a podcast that was going to focus on leaders and achievers that have overcome extraordinary challenges on the road to success. So that was just kind of my testing period.
Gotcha. Okay. So now obviously, and this is an important lesson. We talk about this on a lot of other shows about, how you have to put in the reps, you have to put in the time. And a lot of that is just necessary, whether we're talking about health, business, or just overall general lifestyle, because that's how we learn. That's how we progress. You're going to make successes and wins, but you're going to actually have some failures and some opportunities to learn from. But if you don't take the time to at least put in some of those reps, how are you supposed to learn from that?
Yeah, I'm the kind of person that needs to run into walls to learn things. And
I've been there a few times.
Yes, no, I've been there multiple times in my life, and that's what I love about being an entrepreneur, is that's kind of wired into the experience. And I'm that kind of person that is always kind of seeking an edge of adventure. And that's, that was my strategy with the podcast. I actually find myself getting information overload with things, and I can suffer from paralysis. So I've learned to develop kind of a strategy of, once I get what I feel is a good outline of something, just to step into it, because I'm a hands-on learner, and I end up I'm making connections along the way that really empower me much better than kind of going a traditional route would go. So that's just worked for me. I don't know, that's part of what I do with coaching is exploring different ways of learning. That's my way of learning.
Well, your conversation on paralysis by analysis is very common. I've brought that up actually a few times, and actually, I believe that was brought up on a recent episode in the past week or two, and not by me. Somebody else mentioned this, but that is very, very valid. Let's think about this, like for our listeners, and also for your followers too. This is common. I mean, we are all in information overload these days. That's one of the, I guess, pros and cons of all this wonderful technology is now we do have so much at our fingertips, but now how do you sort through it to stay successful?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it really has to boil down to self-awareness. If you're not aware of what kind of person you are in terms of a learner, it can make it really difficult. Because, let's say that you're an audio or a visual learner. If you're sitting there trying to chug through 50 pages of web content that's, it's all in written form, you're just really going to burn out really quickly. So it's identifying what is, in which way you learn the best first, I think is a key strategy. And then I find in my process, I'm always listening and looking for what I want to look for. I mean, what I want to look like as I move forward. So my standard is always trusting my instinct to identify those people that are doing things at such a high level that I want to model it. And then once I figure out through the mentorship of other people's media and conversations and things like that, once I figure out what they're doing, then I add in me, that's been helpful.
Well, and now, so what you've just explained sounds like a wonderful, smooth, methodical process. But now, granted, how long has that process actually been clear? I mean, this is probably taken a little while for you to get to that point.
How long has that been clear? Probably for about 8 months.
Thank you. Thank you for your transparency. Yes. This is really, really important. I mean, because I do coaching as well, maybe not at your level. But I mean, you and I talked last time, like I studied psychology as well when I was in the university. And it's one of the few things that actually has stuck to me this day, like, years later, like, yeah, I had marketing too, but marketing in college doesn't teach you squat because it's always changing. You need to actually put in the reps and exercise in the real world. But I love the transparency of that because people need to understand that we're all like literally constantly redeveloping this, refocusing it. It's constantly moving and changing. And sometimes it may take people years before they find that clarity. I mean, I don't know about you. What would you say to that?
I think that is the case, but I think what's worked for me is to never push against where I'm at. Like, so if I'm running my head into walls, let's say, on the business side of things, or in, I'm doing a lot of content creation and media things, I'm finding for me that the least effective means of moving forward is generating more guilt, more blame, more self-judgment. That never works. It's always saying while I'm going along, I'm doing the best I can. But that the tactics and the techniques around what I'm doing, the learning process, I grease the wheels when I can take a psychological approach of appreciation of the efforts that I'm making along the way.
So that's an interesting tip there. So as you're progressing, you are like stopping and pausing, taking little notes, and it's like little ticks, I guess, like you're taking little tick points down because it's so easy for us to progress so fast, so quickly sometimes if we're really in our flow state and like you're just ripping through and like you might have just forgotten something powerful that you learned maybe literally 2 hours ago. Yeah.
That I think a lot of entrepreneurs in general, I do a lot of executive coaching, people that are attracted to creating things, creators in general. They depend upon feeling states. It's states, right, that send them motoring down a path. But if you can really learn to slow down in chunking things down by slowing down in the process and just appreciating what's going on, I think that's helpful. And at the same time, I might sound contradictory here. I've found two approaches. One is to just go with the energy that I do have, and then afterwards have a nice kind of cool down to go, okay, which strategies work the best? What actually moved me forward? What moved me backward? So if you can, slow down by just, with gratitude and appreciation for what you're doing in the process. But if you can't, because creation often happens in that place of momentum, dedicating a time to really look at what worked is key. It's always key.
Yeah, I will say in the past, maybe more than 8 months, it's probably been really the last 2 years, I think, leading up to obviously launching this show last year and just all these other progressions in my business and my brand building and my marketing efforts. And like you said, your media efforts, it's like there's always so much happening. And I don't always take note, but I have gotten better at really taking the time now to say, okay, whoa, let's hit the brakes. Let's take time to reflect. Like just really recognize, hey, this is where you were a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. This is where you're at today. Reminding yourself that you might not have achieved everything that you initially set the goals out, but you got to really appreciate and, you said, have gratitude for what has been accomplished and these new things you've learned along the way. And I think so many people forget this and they're just beating themselves up because they feel like they have to be so driven to succeed.
That is like the nail in the head of most entrepreneurs. Is most people create in this place of crisis, right? It feels like a perpetual state of crisis, like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. It's a really fine balance to be able to say, I have to be available for people. I have to be available for opportunities that arise. I have to move forward. And at the same time, maintain a sense of internal integrity in the process, which means you got to be tracking where you're going in the process. Otherwise, you can get thrown off the track pretty quickly. For me, I do things like, if you look in my office, I have boards all over the place because when I'm the kind of person, once my gears get moving, it's really hard for me to slow down. So I have to put up reminders.
Dry erase boards like this?
Right. But mine are like blackboards all over the place. If I turn this camera, you could see all these blackboards around.
Oh yeah, nice. I like it.
So I will put up, like at the beginning of the day, what's my plan? I call it, I have the go, show, and flow. Go is like where I'm headed in terms of my outcome. My show is what I'm doing each day to move towards that outcome. And then the flow is what am I doing in the moment, right? So that doesn't always work because sometimes I get too compelled with inspiration, but I always find myself after a day like that slowing down and going back to it because the boards are there. If they weren't there, I likely wouldn't. I would just have to speed right back into my family and all the needs there.
Oh, it's funny. Like I literally had to rehack my office. This is probably a month ago because I had boards set up differently. Like I still have one of my first vision boards, and not everybody believes in vision boards, and that's cool. But I literally pulled it back out.
Well, they're stupid.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, you know what? It's hanging over my desk right now. So I don't. Before it was hanging here to my left, where my dry erase board is now, and the dry erase board was down. And what I found was I'd put my to-do list stuff to keep myself in check down here. And I thought it was important to have the vision board up here. And for me, what I realized is like, dude, I don't need to look at the vision board every day. Like it's hanging there. And then all of a sudden, if I'm just like brain fried and I look and right in the center of my board, I have it's a fuzzy logoed printout. In the very, very center, it has just one word and it says focus, and everything around it is blurry.
That's very nice.
So I've now retuned my vision board to not just be about, future goals and dreams, but just tools. It's just, okay, boom, flip the switch. So
I think, can we just talk about the vision board really quickly?
Yeah.
For me, this is a concept that's continually growing for me. I started out with this notion that each day that I would have a file of slides, and with each of the slide was a vision of the outcome that I was moving towards. Let's just say what my business looks like. I mean, the actual structure, how, where we would be once it's making $100 million, what my homes look like, all of that stuff down to the smallest detail. But I found after a while that I was getting a little too ego driven, meaning I was attaching to the image when I started to realize that if I'm available to do what's necessary, to make the effort to drive towards my goals, that they're always going to come. And it may not look exactly the way that I had portrayed it. That's what I keep finding. So the outcome is more of I've learned to evolve it to more of a general idea, in terms of a business, I'm a media business creating empowerment material for the world.
Nice.
Right. So I've generalized things a little bit more. And I know that goes against the grain of a lot of really popular success coaches. But I found that psychologically I grind against the notion because my ego is always attaching to it has to look this way, and it creates tension in the process. And that's not helpful for me.
No, it's funny. I agree with you because it's interesting. Even when I've made this board, now that I'm looking at it and you and I are talking, like these are all general visions. I don't need, like, it's funny because my vision board concept originally was started back when I'm sure you've heard of the law of attraction and
Yes.
the book and the movie, The Secret. And yeah, there's that guy in there who's like, oh yeah, man, I had a vision board and I forgot about it. And then years later, I buy this new house and I move there and I'm pulling stuff out of unpacking stuff. And I pull out the vision board and oh my God, it's the exact photo of the house.
Tony Robbins got a story like that too.
Yeah. And I'm like, all right, but that's not, that I agree with you. It doesn't need to be everything. Like half of my stuff on here, I literally just said, I just need something to symbolize this. Like I do have a really cool log cabin photo on here because my girlfriend and I love to go out west skiing. So eventually I want to have a investment property in another state like Utah or Colorado where we have a place to go to, and I want it more rustic like that. I don't care if it looks exactly like that. It's just to symbolize a goal. But I've noticed half of the stuff on here, when I hung them up, and didn't really realize until I'm talking to you right now, is that almost 85% of the images I've overlaid quotes over top of them. So like there's a dude literally sliding on his butt down a glacier with an ice axe in his hand because I love ice climbing and I love skiing and everything else. And it just says, you know what? Health is wealth, right? It's like being healthy enough to do stuff like that. I don't have a goal to go slide on my butt down. Oh, it's in Chile. Down a snow-covered volcano in Chile. I am going to go skiing in Chile. But, so it's like that's how I connected that thing there, just to kind of like tie it all back together.
I'm a big guy. I'm kind of a higher power guy. I'm not about like defining what a higher power is. So for me, like when we're talking about the vision board, it's important for me to trust when I show up to do what needs to be done. For instance, I show up at 4:30 in the morning, right? Into my office. I put the effort in. I go run a corporate program at a corporate. I come back. I spend another 2 hours at the office, and I spend the rest of the time with my family. I find that if I trust enough that there's a collaborative process in this, I show up each and every day with integrity and accountability. The rest is going to take care of itself. So when I get into the details a little bit too much, maybe that's, a reflection of my personality. But for me, it feels like I'm not trusting the process.
Right. I totally agree with that. A lot of us, we get so, again, we said this earlier, get so driven and purpose focused. And it's like, oh my God, it's got to happen like this or like that. I'm like, no, it doesn't.
Right.
Like, it's just the whole point of like, even, just to close out the subject of the board is like, it's there if I need it, right? It's there like, just to remind myself like, oh yeah, that would be cool to do that one of these days or one of these days. It's just there. Like, I agree. If this was 3 years ago, I was all about the board. But again, as I've put in the reps and I've grown indifferently, it's just there. Like I don't need it.
Well, that's a key thing for our listeners to really dig into here is there is no right or wrong way. I've figured that out in my life. I've been through some very intensive training in the past in the Navy and things like that. And there is this kind of training, there is a right and a wrong way. But when that was a very specific time and a specific environment for that. I've had to unlearn some things, and that is one. That if you're really showing up, you're going to find your process, and it's going to be the right process for you. But the key is you got to have authenticity in it. Meaning you can't bullshit yourself to be an entrepreneur, because that gets you nowhere. It really just doesn't. And
now you're going to get me all fired up, which is good because this is how I roll. Yeah. Because I've been there too, and I'm sure you've been there too, where when we're early on, it's like, all right, man, I'm going to find all the experts. I'm going to find all the gurus. I'm going to buy the books. I'm going to buy the DVDs, whatever. And now I got to do everything the way they're doing it. And if I could go on stage right now, and I've just started doing some more public speaking here and there when I have the time, but I love bringing up this subject. It's like, guys, the whole big picture here is that you put in the reps, you put in the effort and the time to develop yourself. But back to your very, very earlier point on paralysis by analysis, it's like, guys, eventually you reach a point where there's so much crap in your head that you literally are bullshitting yourself. It's like, guys, take one piece of all that crap that you've been sponging into your brain and take action on it and see what happens, because that person's best practice might not be your best practice. They're sharing what worked for them, but it might not be in alignment for you. But the other person's that one works, but you haven't tried that one yet.
Yeah, Scott, I think you're onto something, but some of that comes from just experience. I'm 46 years old, right? Mm-hmm. So, initially I kind of had this idea similar to what you're talking about, right? You follow the masters, and this is promoted, and I think it's a good first step. But when you have enough experience really kind of moving forward in business or in just creating a general enterprise, you start to see that it's not about the model, because they all contradict themselves. Mm-hmm. If you've spent enough time looking at any approach, you can find another approach that says exactly the opposite. It's really just taking action. And it's, we're all Michelangelos. Our process is this: we have to start with a blank slate, and you start that by modeling, and then you chip away until you find the you in that. But it takes a while before you kind of have enough of a awareness around that. That's really sounds like a really simple principle. But a lot of people grind against it because they want to have this notion there is a right and this is a wrong, and that's a cultural thing, and it really fucks people up.
Well,
Excuse me if I'm not supposed to.
That's right. No, I don't edit crap. That's right. Hey, man, we're passionate people. We say it how it is, and that way. There's no bullshit. But what you're talking about right now is so true. It's funny because this morning's episode that aired from like a week or two when I recorded it ago was with, and she's a reoccurring person comes on my show. She's from a local organization here called Mind of the Athlete. They're a team of sports psychologists, works with universities and companies and everything else. And she's the nutritionist. So she's a certified nutritionist, sports nutritionist, everything else. 20 years of coaching nutrition. And we talked about how whether you and I are talking about business right now, or we're relating this back to nutrition and people were trying to figure out the right diet, the right meal plan. And I tell people all the time, it's like, listen, again, first of all, I don't promote reading the magazines because half that crap is wrong. But whatever book, magazine, coach, nutritionist, whatever, in the end, you've got to hone it and take that. I'm going to do air quotes for our video watchers on YouTube. The diet. I hate that word because it's a 4-letter bad word, because diet psychologically triggers a short-term mindset. It's a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. But my guys, like a lifestyle is something being built over years. And she and I related on the fact that I'm a hardcore NSNG guy. No sugars, no grains. I wasn't always that way. But in the past year and a half, I've been testing that out with my biohacking that I do with my healthy lifestyle, my fitness, and everything else. And the average everyday person is not ready to just all of a sudden drop completely like all sources of sugars and grains from their diet. Granted, what made it easier for me, I was already off the pastas and breads for years before that. So making that little flip wasn't a big deal for me. And I'd already been adding in more healthy fats and everything else. And she and I both came together to agree that in the end, that doesn't mean that's right for everybody. It's like you could do the research, but you need to start taking action on some of that and see if it's going to work for you and give it enough time to actually be implemented. Like, oh, everybody wants it tomorrow. I'm like, no, dude, like a proper body transformation, when I coach that in my health field, it's like, dude, that you're looking at least 16 weeks to see legit sustainable, body transformation stuff. Like this isn't a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Hey, I'm going to have my beach body in 2 weeks. Like that's not healthy. That's like a business. Like, okay, I'm going to go to a coaching event. I'm going to go to a Tony Robbins event. I'm going to come back and I'm going to crush it over the next 2 weeks. Yeah. And I'm going to be a millionaire. And I'm like, no, dude, that's not how it works.
You're starting to get into a key point. When we start to take action with it, like say we have a first step and it comes because we felt inspired by somebody else's approach, whether that be, through a leading media figure or whether it be for a diet or whatever, we start to wade into this. And most people, they get a little too rigid with that kind of the concepts and they find themselves burning out, right? And this is why there's so few really very successful people that I find and when I say successful, I'm not just talking about financially. I'm talking about psychologically,
life balance,
energetically, spiritually, community-wise, family balance, all that kind of stuff. It's because they understand that it's not about a right or wrong. It's about taking the action, identifying more of what is right for you. That's the whole process. The process is this may sound a little woo-woo, but I'm going to say it anyway. We're all in this process of figuring out who and what we are and to show up in the most powerful way that we can. I really believe that. And that's kind of what you're describing with people with, with a diet. The first wall that they run into, meaning this didn't happen overnight, right? Because they bought into some rigid concept about what a diet is or what and then you went into business or what a business is. Business isn't about how much you're bringing in your bank account. It's relationships.
Yeah.
It's what you're offering to people and what you're getting in return.
Oh, I've been in sales and marketing as a career for years. Like my primary background is years of sales and marketing. My biggest client, I do that now, business development for them. And the biggest thing that I teach their newer people when I'm training them is like, guys, like you're building relationships. This is not a cold transactional, here's my product or my service, buy this. Like you have to understand that, yes, there's different length sales cycles, depending on how strong the relationship is, right? So it's like, and this is the person you want to have come back to you and keep buying from you because there's a relationship there. And there's the age-old rule of, hey, it's a hell of a lot cheaper to keep an existing customer than it is to spend money on time and advertising and marketing to acquire a new customer.
No, that's so true.
Relationships. So again, this goes back to just, friendships and stuff like that. If you're in this mindset of just take, and I'll go woo woo, the universe isn't going to like you. At all. Okay.
Well,
the universe is going to smack you down. Oh my God. Yeah.
I think it does. And we fall in love with this notion though, that if we just put enough energy and commitment and motivation into taking what we need, that's promoted quite a bit, that you're going to be successful. And I think what you really see when you work with enough people, like I coach executives and I also coach people that are, moving through the crisis of addiction and things like that. But when you see enough people and the disparity between those two populations, you see just as much discontent with people that have, like say I'm coaching an upper level executive is making $2.5 million a year. I'm seeing just as much inner turmoil and discontent in that person as I do with the one who's the addict in recovery, right? And it's because of that notion. They bought into the notion that it's about taking, and they've let go of the critical pieces of what it means to be human, and that's how can I give something to get something in return? First, you got to give, right? It's the giving that allows the getting. I think, that's just kind of my perspective.
I've always been that way. Not always. Let's be real. Okay, come on. I would say thanks.
I've been horrible at taking.
Let's say 2005 to 2006 was my awakening into finally doing charity work and stuff like that. Like prior to that, like all I did was donate blood. I'm like, okay, you got to start somewhere. If for our listeners, maybe that's what you're doing. Good. Yeah, you're doing something. But then that led to showing up and doing volunteer work at a cancer, charity. And then next thing you know, I'm running the website for them in my free time. And next thing you know, I'm helping run the events. And like we would raise 6 figures a year locally here for cancer vaccine research happening at a St. Luke's University hospital here. So it was like our tiny little group. So that was my awakening into what now years later, a lot has changed.
I've used that as a principle when I'm finding that I'm putting in the effort and showing up, but there's no movement. I go, oh, I'm not giving enough. So that's when I go to charity. I go, I've lost track somewhere. And that kind of woke up with me when my son was born. I have a 3-year-old who has Down syndrome, right? Wow. So this really kind of helped shift my perspective on the way that I was approaching life. I've always been a fairly service-oriented person, but I realized a lot of the service that I was offering was selfish, meaning I was showing up for people to get something out of them which sounds kind of creepy when you're a coach and you're a psychotherapist.
But this is not uncommon. This is not uncommon.
It's a very common first step. We step into relationships to get what we're missing. And I had to, through shifting points like relationships with my son, powerful mentors that slowed me down and said, why are you asking that question in your session? I had to take good hard looks at what am I doing here? Am I really looking to work through my own need through a really hard question like that? Or am I asking a question to serve somebody, to really move them forward? Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense because, and again, I don't have your background working with relationships and stuff, but I could speak to that because, oh God, it might be almost 2 years now, but whatever. Like I came from, you and I talked a bit about this, I think, on our last call, but I was in the corporate world here, then left the corporate world here. I'd finished a degree at nights and weekends as an adult student, marketing, psychology, boom. Then, I was like, you know what? I want to live life a little bit in my 30s and went out west to serve as a wildland firefighter with the federal government.
Which is cool.
I was like, it was so cool. So cool.
Yeah.
The life-changing experiences. But the power of that 2-year transition, 2 to 3 year transition was, hey, number one, it got me the hell out of the East Coast. I got to go live in Arizona and Colorado. And then on the government dime, when my own tax money and your tax money, travel around, to all over the West to go fight wildfires. Cool. And there's a whole breadth of depth that I can dig into that. But the one side effect that I'm relating back to your conversation here is that I made a decision that I was going to do as much self-work as I could during that time when I wasn't hiking in the mountains and trying to fight, trees on fire. But I did not explore relationships, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. Nowadays, I would go back and I'm like, I was making some friendships and I had some of my regular circles, but I wasn't allowing myself romantically to get involved because I made the excuse, oh, well, you're gone sometimes for a month or two at a time. Why would you want to drag somebody's heart through that? And I'm like, well, that's not really my decision to make. So, but that was one of those areas of my life that was underdeveloped and I wasn't spending enough time on that. And I realized after that, after moving back here, after living in Colorado, after the firefighting and then coming back here, I realized that, wow, I have been out of touch with the romantic side of my life. And I think, oh, I can get back into dating. And I did that. And then I met my girlfriend we now live together now in a very serious relationship. But we ended up taking a 3-month break because my head was still so far up my ass that it was still all about me. And I was faking, trying to make it more about us because my head was still stuck out west because I loved that lifestyle so much. And I did 3 months of intense, during the breakup, I was like, I know psychology. I gotta be able to hack this. So I literally bought all kinds of romantic self-help stuff, books, everything else. I dug in, man. It was like going on a research project because I wanted to figure it out. Yeah. And I will say it was very powerful because it reminded me, like, number one, I wasn't living in the moment. I wasn't living here. Now, like, to be fair, I've been happy everywhere I live. So what the hell's wrong with you, Scott? Like, you're an outdoorsy nut. You're friendly. Like, you can be happy anywhere. Just because that was just a different chapter of your life. So, and then also it's like, am I living? And also the other thing is I've always said this for years. I said, people do not belong in relationships until they figured out their own shit. So, because I'm sick and tired of seeing people saying, oh, well, this person completes me. And I'm like, well, no, I would rather be complete and then you be the bonus round. That's my saying. I'm not a PhD.
Those people are in for rude awakenings.
I'm like, dude, never look to somebody else to complete you or some other thing like, oh, that car or that job. Like, you need to be happy with you, because when that car or that job or that relationship gets ripped away and you go crashing and burning into a period of depression and a lot worse things, holy crap, man. Like, guys, you got to focus on you.
Yeah, and that is something I work with a lot in couples. I think there's kind of two paths that I see with relationships. And let's see if I can bring this all the way back around to business in some way. One of the paths is we start out developmentally, we just don't have the tool set, right, to understand these things and what it means to be complete. That's just part of the human journey. Like, who am I? What am I? What makes me tick? What do I need in my relationships? We don't have those things. So when we lean into another person, it becomes an opportunity to really identify those things. So that's when you start to hear people say things like that. Well, he completes me.
Yeah.
But eventually when people don't develop to a level where they start to see that another person can't make you whole, another person can't make you happy, another person, those things don't happen in a relationship.
Right.
It's when a person gets a sense of what their needs are, and then they go to another person and they go, here's my needs. What do you think of those?
Yeah.
And then the other person
Are we in
goes,
alignment?
oh, well, here's the ones right. Here's the ones that I'm okay with. And here's the ones that I'm not going to be able to help you out with at all. Right. That's a healthy relationship. And if people don't develop by starting out in that place where he's here to complete me or she's here to complete me, if they don't develop into whole selves by identifying what their personal needs are, they end up very unhealthy. And then I end up seeing them in couples coaching.
I've got a friend of mine now going through a relationship transition, married, kid, and everything else. And, I don't need to get into specifics for privacy, but I was like, you know what? And we were having a conversation, and I shared some of what I told him. I'm like, listen, I only have 3 months of self-work that has now spanned over 2 years, thanks to me putting the time in during that 3-month break. I said, I'll send you everything I got. I got everything on my hard drive. But I said, you got to put in the time, and you can't rush it if you're trying to fix or heal a relationship. Mm-hmm. And you can't make it about just you. You got to make it about both of you. But I also told him, I'm like, listen, if there's some stuff inside of you that you have just never worked on, you need to do that. I mean, again, go talk to a counselor or a professional. I'm not the PhD. I'm just speaking from experience. I'm like, you have to make sure that you are completely cool with whatever's going on inside of you, or else all that work for the relationship is going to be wasted. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, my couples coaching, I often do that. If I see that there's two people that are expecting somebody else to resolve maybe something that's incomplete with themselves, let's say anger or judgment or this or that, and they're expecting their loved one to be able to resolve it, they end up running their heads into the wall because it's only the person that can resolve it. So then I'll go, okay, how about we do this? We'll take a break. You do your individual work, and I'll give them specifics on what I hear, that might be the work, as well as the other partner. And then I say, go do your personal work and then come together. And let me introduce you to something that's really powerful with this, because this goes with counseling co-founders. A lot of times when I send people away, here's what I find. They don't come back.
Okay.
They don't come back. They don't come back because they're afraid of doing the work. Right.
Yeah.
And it's easier to go back to an old pattern. So they'll go back they won't do the work, and they'll go back to the relationship because they're afraid of confronting what they really need. Right. And you have this a lot too, with co-founders like that, because they're not healthy enough to say, well, here's what I feel I really need in this enterprise. I'm afraid of saying it out loud because I know that you might not agree with it. Right. And, they're just too afraid of bringing those two things together, but understanding what's driving the process individually. They don't want to do the work. Right. That happens quite a bit. Does that make sense?
It doesn't surprise me at all, because that friendship and a couple others I've seen over the years, it's the same. I know they're not putting in the work because they don't want to, or one will say, well, you should put in the work because you're the problem, and the other one won't. And I'm like, well, if it's a relationship, shouldn't you both be doing some of the work? I mean,
well, it's the principle of showing up. And this is where we can bring it back to business.
Yeah.
Look, you got to show up for yourself, and nothing happens if you're not willing to take the action for yourself. And that does not mean it's easy. Matter of fact, it means exactly the opposite, because growth comes in a place of discomfort, period. That's just the way it is. And everybody wants to feel good all the time. And that is just, that keeps people stuck, right? It really keeps people stuck.
I completely agree with this, because that's why my lifestyle piece, like being the adrenaline junkie, and I love putting myself into awkward situations because it's challenging. It's changing your brain, your hormonal patterns, your chemical, everything. It's like, dude, it wants to get shocked. Your body wants to get shocked once in a while. Your brain wants to get shocked once in a while. It's okay, because number one, things get easier, but then it's taken me years of channeling that in my fun and my fitness life, and then realizing, holy crap, man, it's the same exact thing.
Totally. It's always
in the business world. Yeah.
It's the same principles. And that's what I kind of like about it is like, I find the older that I get, I'm not complicating things. I'm simplifying them because all these things are coming together. Well, I can go back to, I went through Navy SEALs training and I washed out, and I was just a young man of 18 years old.
What kind of training? Sorry, your internet was a little choppy there. So what kind of training
Navy
was that?
SEALs training. So I was in BUDS. Did you get it?
Yeah, I got Navy SEAls on that one.
Training. Yeah. And I wasn't at that time, like I'm going to go back, hopefully be able to kind of tease out the principle I'm talking about of showing up. I was an 18-year-old kid that really wasn't there for the right reasons, right? In matter of fact, I had this take mentality. I was like, what is the SEALs going to give me, right? Like, what will it do for me?
Wow.
And I ended up I washed out of the program after 4 months into it because I wasn't healthy enough or aware enough at that point in time to see that was going on. I wasn't willing to show up and put in the work for myself. I was more about what will this do for me? Meaning, hey, politically down the road, maybe I could be an astronaut. Maybe I could do all of this stuff. It was just I wasn't willing to, show up. That's really what it was about. And, I heard things like that when I was a young man too, but it just didn't resonate. And as I went along, it became a major lesson for me that really worked in my favor. I don't look back on that with shame. I look at it as, that was an opportunity for me to wake up just a little bit more and a little, in every opportunity in life provides that. But that was a powerful one for me to look back on, how selfish I was. And I thought just by showing up and being willing to do something like that I was like, hey, I should be a hero just because I was willing to be a Navy SEAL or something. No, that's just not the way it works.
I got a taste of that when I showed up to be the hotshot out west.
Totally.
Because the elite wildland firefighters are called hotshots. So you have that job title and it's like, you think you're badass. Yeah. And we literally were kind of like basically the special forces of wildland firefighting, which was awesome. But that first year, because it doesn't matter how old you are. I was as old as my squad bosses. So I was the old guy on the crew and everybody's like 18 to 24, classic military, break you down, rebuild you. Yep. And I realized like, dude, you got to take a big old, what did my friend's father used to say when we were kids? You need to have a big old slice of humble pie.
It's totally about that.
Yeah. And I was like, man, it flashed back in my head from when you were 16. I remember him saying that quote. And I was like, that's some wisdom right there, man. And all my squad bosses told me like, Scott, you're strong, you're fit, you're older. Clearly you've done stuff. We don't give a shit about any of that. He's like, here's your tool, get in line, go dig in the dirt. Cause that's what we do. Show up and he's like, put in the work and we'll reward you guys. Don't worry about it. Like just stop worrying about everything and just work hard. And it was just a really good experience. So.
It was good. I can relate to you through your story. That's what was good for me is to really get an early wake up call about what life is really about. I kind of had some delusions. I'd always been an achiever and a kind of an adventurer. And here I show up and, some of the world's toughest training. And with this notion of, they need to give me something, which was just kind of like my first whack upside the head of like, hey, knucklehead, it's not about that. It's about humility and showing up for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to pretend like there aren't people that squeak by and they're not there for the right reasons.
Oh, sure.
There are those, but I'm the kind of person where this is where I'll say a higher power comes in. It's not allowed. Let's just put it that way. I end up running into the wall and getting the lesson.
Well, and here's
what I'm happy for.
Here's trying to connect it all back. Big picture here is now with TOOWI, right?
Yeah.
So and to our listeners, guys, that's TOOWI. So TOOWI.com or TOOWImedia.com. But is that is this one of those life experiences that helped you create that acronym and build that name?
I think in general, it's impossible for me to run away from my experiences when, everything that I do is kind of a reflection of, in business, we say, create an avatar. I'm the avatar. And I think that's what people end up finding out in business that, you're creating your avatar based upon your your desires, your needs, your wants, and all that kind of stuff. So TUI is, it stands for Two Open Opportunities Within. I've had to really examine my motives in getting bigger in business. I'm launching a media arm of my business, and it's to put my brand out there in a bigger way. So TUI stands for Two Open Opportunities Within. And that means that anything that I do, I can't bullshit myself that I'm putting something out there for myself. I got to go, how is this really going to serve people? And any good businessman does that. I think I see that. But it's a reminder for me that when I create something, I got to see what need is this serving? Is this really allowing me to serve people in a powerful way? And not just merely like me jacking off, me putting my face out there just to have my face out there. Hey, I know, the dynamics of relationships, strategies and communication strategies. I'm just going to put it out there because I can. No, like I have to ask myself hard questions. Like, how's this going to serve this audience or this group? Or that's conscious business, I think, is what I'm talking about.
And you know what? That's, I think, defines a successful thought process when you're thinking more long-term like that, because I'm guilty of that too, where as Live the Fuel grows, I have lots of opportunities where it's like, okay, do I go get an updated, professional photo shoot done and put more of my face besides the flaming logo out there and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what? When the time is right for that, it's got to make sure, like you just said, it's got to serve a purpose. So obviously, if I'm going to go do an event where I'm giving back or I'm doing public speaking, then great, let's get some photography done there, but not just with me. I want to make sure they're in the photos too, because then when I share that content, it's benefiting them in the online space, not just me. Right. I don't know. That's how I kind of think.
Yeah. Well, let me tie this into something that's kind of coming out of our conversation. This is part of the entrepreneur's journey, is really kind of figuring that out for yourself, because there's a lot of big figures out there. Like, one of my mentors that I really enjoy listening to, but he's a total nut job, and I mean that in the most loving way as possible, is Grant Cardone. I mean, this guy,
10X man himself.
He's going a million miles per hour, but he says things where I got to slow down and go, that doesn't fit me. For example, when he's talking about serving a need in society through his products, like he says things like, I want to be the biggest brand in the world that comes to sales training. Now, for me, I have to go, well, slow it down. I want to be successful. I want to serve people. But if I'm saying something throwing that wide of a net, I'm not caring what I'm putting out there. Meaning I'm just throwing stuff out there, and it may not be connected to a service that is going to benefit somebody in some way.
Well, right? we talk about in marketing. We talk about in marketing why it's so important to niche yourself, or niche, however you want to pronounce that. But it's like, that's so important. So yeah, who knows? Maybe because we don't play at his level yet, but maybe because once you reach that level, he can literally transplant into any industry out there. So like, for example, Tony Robbins can be hired and implemented into all different types of industries, groups, whatever. He's now like one of the top hired keynote speakers because of his overall message. And it's now being adapted right to this company or that charity or whatever he's doing his events. Like for example, my nutrition company that I use, they landed Tony Robbins. So this summer in Vegas at our big annual celebration event, they're bringing in Tony Robbins. I'm like, damn, I don't want to spend the money that he charges to go to his his events. So I'm like, I think I'm definitely going to the event this year because he's speaking at it.
Take advantage of that.
Yeah. But then like Grant Cardone, I met him here. So here I'm wearing, for my listeners, I'm wearing the Thrive hat again. So Thrive is that Make Money Matter event from San Diego last year that I went to. They were found, first year was Vegas 2 years ago. Last year was San Diego. This year they're back in Vegas again. But they bring in tons of world-class speakers to educate entrepreneurs. And it's the biggest event I've ever gone to, where they had like literally over 20 different speakers over the weekend. But we had Jack Canfield last year too, and Grant Cardone. So I enjoyed Grant's that message. He hits hard, he hits fast, and he just rips you wide open, which is good because you need that kind of wake up call.
Yeah.
But I agree with you as well. There is some, now that I'm following him on YouTube and Instagram, some of his messages just off the freaking rocker. Love his energy.
Well, he's kind of comes from this old school place of like throw as much shit out there as you can.
Yeah.
Because I get his concept. And I'm not saying he's wrong necessarily. I'm just saying it doesn't fit me. He's saying you gotta let go of the limitations in the way that you think. If you really want to make the biggest impact, you got to think in the biggest ways. I get it. But I'm also saying for me, when I promote my brand, I want to make sure I'm connected to the messages that I'm putting out there. And I don't want to lose track of that because it's got to serve people. And if I'm just going, with my marketing team, I'm saying, I don't care how you get it out there, just throw it out there. No. I'm losing track of a key principle for me which is service, right? So it doesn't fit me necessarily.
Well, and that's like a great example on that is when people are choosing their platforms for their messaging. So I completely agree with you, right? It's like, listen, guys, we do not want to be throwing that giant wide net because that, number one, it costs more money, right? So you want to focus yourself, focus your message, focus your direction, and you'll be much more successful. And a lot of big entrepreneurial public speakers and keynote speakers are now sharing the same concept. But I'll just pick social media, for example, for marketing. I didn't always crush it on every single social media channel. I tell people all the time, like, guys, pick one or two channels. You can exist on all of them, but pick one or two just to really crush it on. And so I'm very consistent with Facebook. I'm very like Twitter. I hardly ever, I'm tweeting a little more nowadays because it's gotten easier, but like now, it's helped me land other podcast co-hosts on my show because if I listen to their show and their episode, I literally share it from the iTunes or the Stitcher app and they're tagged in it. So they know that I'm talking about them. And the one guy, Vinny Tortorich, he's been on my show like 3 times, very successful fitness confidential podcast. And, but he says, he's like, I'm the guy. Like, he's like, dude, you're the guy who's always tweeting about me. I love that. Thank you so much. Cause he retweets every single thing. So that's the only thing that I'm consistent on Twitter on. But then, I talked earlier about how I've added in YouTube again for this type of content because I was already creating audio using Skype. And I'm like, well, why don't I just pay for the basic package on Zoom? Now I can do audio and video and share content to the YouTube world because there's video people who maybe haven't found podcasting yet. So that's why I decided to do that. Number one, I'm not doing any extra work. I'm paying a little bit more, but now I can give more content to my audience. And there's no extra editing or all I do is hit upload and it's the same show notes that goes on the website that goes into YouTube and I connect everything. It's just tying everything together. So that's been one of my latest strategies. Did I think of that a year ago? No, that popped up about 15 episodes ago. When I launched the show, it was audio only. YouTube just started getting added back in because I found Zoom. So again, it goes back to your point. It's got to feel good with what you're doing. It's got to feel right.
It's got to fit.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like a deeper principle of in business for me as I move forward, like making sure that I'm connected to the messages that go out there. And as you grow, I think that that's always a challenge because, there's principles in business, which is, look, you got to scale, you got to get your face out there. Social media is a perfect example of what you're talking about here. There's 50 million different channels to go through nowadays. What do I focus on, this or that? And if you're trying to keep up by spreading yourself too thin with too little resources, you lose track of the message. And I don't want to do that. But what you're talking about with social media, that's a challenge for me too. Because I want people to see what I'm doing, and I'm kind of moving towards this launch, which is June 1st for the Pioneers of Insight podcast.
Yep.
And I'm just I'm exploring different channels in social media, and that you can lose a lot of energy for the stuff that matters when you spread yourself too thin with social media. I'm already finding that out. Learning the ins and outs of the different platforms and this and that. that's a challenge that anybody faces.
That's what I said earlier. It's like, you know what, pick one or two that you really want to start crushing it with.
Yeah.
When it becomes automated and you really work out all the kinks and it's flowing, then maybe consider pushing a little more and onto another platform or something. Like the whole what is that yellow icon app that everybody's all about, the younger generation?
Snapchat.
Yeah. I exist on there.
Yeah.
Don't use it.
Yeah.
I tried. I didn't like it. I was like, this is too much. I don't have the bandwidth. Right now. I'm like, nah. I was like, if I bring on an intern who Snapchats, great.
Right.
I'll make you the Snapchat guru.
Right.
No problem.
Yeah. I kind of feel like if I'm not going to use it in the most effective way, why bother? Like why noodle with something and may possibly even make yourself look worse.
Like I throw in the occasional Facebook Live video. That's it. I don't want a Snapchat taking over my life where I'm just all the time. I'm like,
well, there's Periscope too.
I did do Periscope too, but that's fallen off the radar a little bit. But admittedly, because it's owned by Twitter, I mean, it's all integrated. So people still are crushing on Periscope. Again, I always research the platforms and then I go with what feels right for me. And I'm like, don't have the time for that. I don't, it is what it is. Like you'll find that like me, I'm very busy on Instagram. Because I do a lot of quotes. I think I'm the only podcaster that I found that's consistently is sharing the graphic. Like when your episode goes live, I take the core graphic image from the website and I post that image to Instagram because Instagram is image heavy. So all of my Instagram cycled into my feed. You'll like every 10th post, you'll see a podcast episode amongst other stuff. So it's something new I'm experimenting with.
Well, it's great. I'll steal it from you.
Hey, go ahead. All right, that's how we learn. So Facebook's automated for me now. Twitter automated for me now. So Instagram has been my big new tool for 17. I've already was on it, but I'm really doing more digging into it because I've noticed you can really grow a following faster. So
John Lee Dumas has been a help in this regard for me. Like we talked about kind of our relationship to his material before.
Yeah.
Just the concept of chunking things down. Like I've been more careful of finding ways to balance my workload, and I would be a numbskull if I wasn't willing to put in the work to understand what each channel of social media could provide.
Right.
So I'm finding ways to do that. I'll put aside, a couple hours a day each day to experiment with different areas before I just hand it over to a VA or a marketing person. Because I want to understand the core concepts before I, make it part of my system.
I made that mistake when I launched the podcast. I went and hired a VA right off the bat to help me launch the show. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks ago, he decided to close his business. So I never actually did a full page of show notes on my blog and my website on my own, or even edited the episode. Yeah. It's a lot of work. So I am still outsourcing the audio editing. I don't want to deal with that at all. But I've been writing the show notes, and eventually I might try and find an intern for that. But now that I've put in the time, I should have done that from the beginning, but I was really excited to launch. And I do believe in delegating. It's like, listen, what are you best at? I'm best at talking to people and having a great conversation. Cool.
Yeah, you're pretty good at that.
Well, thank you. And you are as well. I love your transparency and your honesty. So that's, I think, is what's crucial. If you want to build a successful podcast, since we're audio based, is literally listen to the person you're talking to and have a two-way conversation. I can't stand the podcasts that are all Q&A. I know John Lee Dumas is crushing it out there, and he's one of the most successful podcasters. I'm subscribed to his show. I try and listen when I can, but it's no longer in my top priority, wavelength.
Yeah. Well, I have him on my show next week.
Oh. So how the hell did you get him?
I don't know. I seem to have some good
I'm in his private Facebook groups.
Things like that. I just have good mojo with stuff like that.
All right.
But that's one thing that I'm kind of trying to figure out. Like when people are systematic like that, I'm entering a new niche with this media that I'm creating, which is it's epic cinematic storytelling around leaders and achievers that have overcome extraordinary challenges in their life. So I have to be able to tease out the story in people. And this is, obviously our listeners are going to hear this, and maybe John Lee will hear this. I don't know, but I'm just being honest. that's one aspect of him. I'm going, oh man, is he going to be able to do this? Because he's so rigid and so formulaic.
Yeah. He only gives you 20 minutes.
Yeah. I think that's part of his success. He found his system and he's just crushing it with one system that he found that worked.
Well, he's also launching literally a new episode every day of the week. That's a lot of interviews.
It is crazy how much he does, but he's got a team now. He's got a major team.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's part of my challenge, and an interesting kind of, like, if you want kind of a backstage view of what I'm doing right now, I'm interviewing a lot of people that I'm finding that may be influencers that don't necessarily have the vulnerability that's needed to really talk about the core of what drives them. And,
we talked about
maybe
this
even
last
acknowledge their challenges in their life. And to me, I don't find it very helpful to just connect to people that are just informational, right?
Yeah.
Some people do. But for me, I find that I learn through the story, and it's like the wipeouts, the crack ups and the recoveries are the things that really helped me, is hearing how people got through those things.
And that's where you and I align very, very well, because I'm like, what is the point of putting yourself out there unless people really get to know who you are? I could just be some other guru and some other influencer that just dumps tons of knowledge bombs and nuggets. And I'm like, that's great, but you're just like everybody else. So yeah, there's people who like to follow certain podcasts and it's just full of knowledge and it's a checklist. But back to our earlier conversation, beginning of the show, it's like, eventually you got to start taking action on that stuff, dude. You can't keep absorbing information. Right. And people need to hear the truth from people like you and I, where it's like, dude, we've struggled through stuff just like you. Yeah. Like, we're real. We're not hiding anything.
Yeah. No, I think it's helpful. I'm a business owner right now that I'm going to be as transparent as I can right now. I'm a man who runs a corporate program. I facilitate large groups and things like that.
Yeah.
And on the side, I'm running a business. I'm launching a media company, and I have a wellness business, which has coaching for executives and couples that are kind of moving and things like that. Or let's just say people that need some conflict resolution, things like that. So I have that business, and then I have a media business, and I have a full-time position on the outside.
Yeah.
So those things, to be able to figure out how to prioritize, how to be authentic in the process while you're building something, how to do it effectively, how to be productive and efficient with your time and all that kind of stuff. I don't care who says it, there is no easy way to do that.
No.
And there is no easy decision either. Like, how much family time do I devote? How much of my true self or my authentic self do I share when I feel split between the thing that I'm truly passionate about and what I'm doing on the outside? Those are real challenges that everybody can face. So when you hear people that are just giving you platitudes and anecdotes, that's not necessarily helpful. It's more of, how are you managing it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you get by? How do you make it work? And so that's where I want to go with my work, and I'm glad you're doing the same thing.
And I think that's important. Like me, I am fully independent. I talked about this last time. It didn't happen overnight. And admittedly, I'm very heavy on one contract. So my one client is pretty much it is a primary income stream. So it's not a full, like, everybody's got different styles of businesses, but my service providing relationship from a sales and marketing professional world is like, hey man, I'm heavy on one client. So you could kind of say like, oh, you're kind of like an employee of their company, except I'm not. I mean, I have my own LLC, my own business, everything else. And admittedly, I used to be an employee of that company. So it's like years ago. So it's just funny how that some comes full circle, but they still need the skills. They still need the talent. So, hey, let's sign a contract and let's keep working together. Boom. But it all starts somewhere. That's the point. And I think some of the most successful entrepreneurs to be, as well as the ones that are already very successful out there, all started with the side hustle. I mean, I see that word hashtagged all over the place. Hustle, hustle, hustle. So, hey man, that's what you're doing. You're finding what works now in your current state. And if 2E and everything else you're doing blows up, and you have to pull the trigger, and that now it's just your things, which is scary as shit, by the way.
I'm on the precipice of that happening.
Right. And let's be honest, I don't care how confident we are. Yeah. It's totally scary as hell. Yeah. Like, it freaks me out still to this day. It's like, I got to stay on top of everything.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that helps with that transition, because I'm in the process of deliberating contracts between my full-time employer, so I can step forward and make this my full-time gig, the same transition that you made. The one thing that helps is having real data behind it, meaning it's not just you saying, I can do this. You've seen that you can move an enterprise forward. And I have real data on the other side too, as well as, years of time in a leading in the corporate world where there's real feedback and real surveys and real things like that. So it's not me BSing myself. I think there's really bad advice there in culture where they say, hey, just pull the plug and do what you're passionate about. Well, here's the problem.
Where's your money?
You have children. You don't have insurance.
I mean,
that's not always that. Yeah,
I made that mistake.
Very dangerous.
It was painful. It was. I was stressed out all the time. That was back during my 3-month transition. That helped pretty much lead up to that 3-month transition where I thought I could just pull the trigger and do my own thing just with my nutrition business that I have on the side. And I realized that now years later, it's like I've been using. I work with a company called Isogenics. I've been doing that since 2010. Since the firefighting years. And I love it. Like literally during the show, I've been drinking their cleanse because I'm fasting today. So it's a part of my life. But I realize now, I'm like, I don't want that to be my one thing. Like a lot of people choose that, but that takes years to develop. You can't just turn the key and have it. And I was like, I'm just going to free up all my time because I was making good money doing it. I'm like, I'm just going to dive in head first. And it just stressed me the hell out and it did not work. And luckily, I didn't crash and burn the business, and the income stream is still there. But I realized it's one of my fueling income streams, diversified income streams, like Robert Kiyosaki talks about, right? And it's like, hey, man, it's cool. It balances my life. I make money doing it. I'm helping other people get healthy using it, so it's good for the universe. But to your point, yeah, when people say, "Oh man, you just got to rip the lid off," well, once you're in, you have no excuses, and you just got to go for it. It was the worst coaching ever.
It is bad. I mean, you do have to think practically, and I think it's not practical to the place where you're paralyzed. No, you still have to show up. So I'll give an example for our listeners. Meaning, I prepared the launch of this business for the past 5 years. So it was setting aside time in my life where I saw where I was headed, and I had a plan. And I was devoting time. But when I was devoting time, I was accurately measuring where I was going. Like, am I actually succeeding? I have measures. Well, I'm making more money in my business on the side. So what I'm doing, it shows that I can do it. Yeah. So I had to have real measures in place to prove to myself, because I do not want to BS myself and say, hey, I could just go out there and launch a media company. No. You have to show that you can show up for yourself and that you have the tool set, the skill set, and capabilities to run something like that. Otherwise, you can put yourself at risk, and as well as a lot of other people.
Especially if you are a family, because now you're serving yourself and you're not serving your family. You have to be putting, and that was my way. Well, I don't have a family, but I had a girlfriend, and we were trying to build a longer relationship. So it's like, hey, man, you did a very selfish decision. And you weren't thinking about both of you. I told myself that I was doing this for us. And I'm like, no, I did it for me. So, and that's the thing. I mean, you got to be honest, be transparent, own your mistakes, own your shit, but use that as fuel for the fire to be doing like what you're doing, right? You're putting in the reps in your free time to prove that model can work. And then once the income has generated to the point where it's definitely working, well then, okay, we have proof of concept. Okay. Right. This is a little bit easier to make that decision.
Yeah. And I don't want to make it sound comfortable. It's not comfortable. I mean, I don't have time. So it means I have to make time, which is like getting up at 4:30 in the morning and being consistent, not having days off for 2 years, I mean, legitimately. Yeah. So it takes an effort,
Well, heck, man, I just realized what time it is. We'd be like way over the hour mark. So this has been awesome. I don't want to just cut it right off, but I want to make sure that we've obviously done justice to you and you've been able to get the right messaging out for what you're working on. And obviously it comes back to our audience and what they're going to get out of this, but I already know from our audience, they've gained a lot from you and me talking today.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate doing it. I would just say in closing, I'm prepping for a launch of the Pioneers of Insight podcast that features stories with leaders and achievers that have overcome major challenges on the road to success. That's if you visit www.pioneersofinsight.com, you can keep up with me. I'm constantly putting out teasers and little clips from the interviews that I'm doing while I'm prepping for the launch.
And you've already got the Facebook page up too.
Yeah, I got the Facebook page. I got a mastermind there that already for people that I found in my own in this process that I was getting frustrated with not having just a good group of people that you can pitch ideas and evaluate and without too many rules. And so I created kind of an do that. So if you're interested in that, that's called UpHustle.
Yes,
and,
I'm actually in that community with you. So
yeah, thanks much. It's just getting started right now, so we'll see where it goes. And if you want to keep up with my media company, www.2emedia.com.
Yeah, and again, for our listeners and also the YouTubers, all this goes into the website, into the show notes for this episode. So when it airs, you'll be able to just go back to livethefuel.com, and every single profile, I always ask my co-hosts, they send me their LinkedIn links and everything else, and I load it all in there and hyperlink it for you. So you can just click and follow, click and like, click and share, and go crazy with it. So, well, now back to you, Jerry. I actually close out every episode with the co-host having the final word of the show. And this is beyond what obviously helping people follow your content. This is actually, if they forget every single thing that we discussed on this show today about you and everything I talked about, what is a powerful message or all-encompassing messaging that you're really trying to get out to the world when people meet you, follow you, listen to you speak, coach with you, whatever? Is there something out there that, hey man, like this is a great, powerful final word that I want to share? And once you have that, then just hang tight. I'll stop recording and then I'll give you a proper goodbye after we're done closing out the show. Yeah,
I think I got it.
Cool.
I mean, I would say this, it's just a word of encouragement that probably the quickest path to success is by not grinding against yourself, giving yourself permission to fail. And I know that's said a lot, but when I say permission to fail, that means when you're trying to define what it is you want to do for yourself, you got to ask yourself some key questions like, how does this serve me? And for me, that ends up going further out, my family, my community, and my planet. And I think if you can ask it, I call that the power question. If you can answer that with integrity and do not bullshit yourself, then you can move forward. But only until you answer that question, move forward, right?
Wow. I love that. So again, guys, give yourself permission to fail. And that's something that I've had to learn over the years as well. So hang tight, Jerry. I'll give you a proper goodbye. So again, to our listeners, guys, that is Jerry Gara of 2We Media, 2we.com. Again, everything's going to be noted in the show notes. Definitely check out his upcoming podcast. Follow him on Facebook. Follow him on Twitter. He's everywhere. Again, we'll have everything linked for you on livethefuel.com. So again, guys, this is what we're all about. We're here to fuel your health, your business, and your lifestyle. So keep living a fired up, epic life. And we'll talk to you guys again soon.
Get after it.
Yeah. All right. Podcast is clear. YouTube's still feeding. But hey, man, thank you. This has been awesome. It only took us how many?
It was a lot of fun.
Reschedules.
Yeah, sorry about that. You know what was happening is I have conflicting calendars, and I didn't realize how, I have like 3 different Google calendars.
Yes.
And they were all working against themselves. So
that'll be my next phase. I've since launched with Acuity scheduling, which is what I use.
I use that too. Yeah.
So I did find out from someone in support that I can somehow load all my calendars into that somehow and get them to work.
I found that out recently too, so I got to figure out how to.
Yeah, I just haven't had time to do that.
Yeah, me neither.
I still depend on my iPhone because the iPhone will overlay, and I have each calendar with a different color, so that way I can see, okay, green versus red. I know which calendar I'm looking at on just one calendar app, the stock iPhone app. So that's really my hack is I just look on the iPhone.
Yeah, that helps. Hey, one thing that we came up with the John Lee Dumas thing, the reason I think he signed on is because I'm a vet.
Oh, okay.
I think that was it.
That helps.
I leveraged that. I was like, what can I leverage?
Dude, that's part of who you are.
To another. Yeah.
And if nothing else, the keyword name recognition, the SEO from that is powerful But
I know that's a big thing. You know, I was really happy.
I've bought his. I have his. Oh, right behind me there in that little
Mastery Journal.
I have the Freedom Journal and the Mastery Journal. So
yep. I don't have the Mastery Journal yet. I'm still working my way through the Freedom Journal. I think they're very helpful. It's a really simple tool, and I can't believe how much money he's making at it because it's so simple. But
it's so simple. I literally only did the first chapter in the Freedom Journal to launch the podcast, and then I just said I'm not a journaler, and launched a podcast because I just take action.
You did it.
So I still give him credit. I'm like, listen, I opened the book and I used parts of the book to get me going. So it counts. It worked. I just didn't use the whole book. So
right. You didn't need it. It lit your fire.
Exactly. Well, hey man, this has been great. Like I said, if you have any other, besides my questionnaire that I use in the scheduler, which I'm still honing that and improving that, but if you have a list of the links that you want to make sure definitely make it to the show notes, don't hesitate to email me that. And then also make sure I gotta add this to the website scheduler. I have to remind people to send me their headshots or any professional photos because that's what we'll use for the actual web content. Because again, we're adding to your SEO as well.
Totally.
So,
yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. You're on the show next week? I think.
Oh God, is it? I don't even know.
I think it is.
We're crazy.
I have my calendar open in front. Yep. So I will see you next week.
Maybe that's why I was getting confused because there was one calendar where I don't even know what date it is. I'd have to go look. Do you know?
So don't stress about it. I go back and I edit everything into kind of like this story format. As you heard kind of in the trailers, that's what have you heard Startup, the Gimlet Media thing?
I think I listened to one of their episodes. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like that. So I go back and, I add kind of a cinematic background to everything. So it's nice. A ton of work, man.
Yeah, see, I went with lean and mean. I don't want to edit anything. Like we had some issues. Like your internet's I've been getting alerts popping up saying that you had low bandwidth on your end. But I'm like, I'm not going to stop the show if you sound electronica. At least we're still flowing. So we didn't drop the phone.
Right, it's still going. Well, that's one of the challenges of the place I'm at. But I'll let you go, man. Thanks so much for sharing time.
All right. We'll be sharing more.
Fun.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Later.